I shot my wife in the face, right there. She didn't look so pretty after that.
Tomorrow's is the travel date. What was that?
So, I would strongly advise Mr. Crawford to,
The narrative unfolds with the introduction of Ted Crawford, a prosperous Irish aeronautical engineer calling Los Angeles home. Ted's professional expertise involves detecting the minutest flaws in aviation systems, and he hastily departs after sharing a flaw with a colleague, not bothering to await algorithmic confirmation. Shifting the spotlight, we immerse ourselves in the clandestine liaison between Lieutenant Rob and Jennifer Crawford, Ted's wife. Ted, becoming privy to this affair, discreetly observes the unfolding events as his wife returns home. Initiating a confrontation, Ted attempts to share a moment, but his advances are met with indifference. The situation takes a chilling turn when Ted, upon questioning his wife about the affair, brandishes a firearm and tragically shoots her in the head. The echoing gunshot alarms nearby gardeners, prompting them to cautiously approach the scene. Ted, not content with a single shot, intensifies the fear by firing more rounds, causing the gardeners to hastily retreat. Displaying a meticulous approach to cover his tracks, Ted methodically cleans the gun, washes himself clean, and deliberately incinerates the clothing worn during the shocking incident. Subsequent to the gardeners reporting the disturbing event, law enforcement eventually arrives at the scene. Lieutenant Rob, serving as a hostage negotiator, contacts Ted and enters the scene. Ted calmly discloses to the lieutenant that he has shot his wife, leaving the officer shocked upon discovering the lifeless body. As the lieutenant checks for signs of life, Ted seizes the moment, brandishing the gun and pointing it at him. In a sudden turn of events, the lieutenant wrestles the gun from Ted and charges at him, delivering repeated blows to his face, only to be restrained by other law enforcement officers. Ted is subsequently apprehended and taken into custody. Fortunately, subsequent medical examination reveals that Jennifer is miraculously still alive. The narrative then introduces Willie, a deputy district attorney, who receives a call from his colleagues about Ted's attempted murder case. Given the presence of witnesses and Ted's confession, Willie anticipates a straightforward case and opts to handle it promptly. At the preliminary hearing, Ted, surprisingly opting not to request a defense attorney, expresses his desire to represent himself. This decision baffles both the judge and Willie, who advise him to accept legal representation. Ted, however, remains steadfast, insisting on a swift transfer to trial, despite the gravity of the situation. When informed that the district attorney's office can assign a different prosecutor, Ted expresses his liking for Willie and opts to keep him on the case. That evening, Lieutenant Rob approaches Willie with a warning about something peculiar concerning Ted. However, Willie, confident in the available evidence and admissions, believes he will secure a victory in the case. During a meeting with Nikki Gardner, his boss, Willie engages in some flirtation. Their conversation is interrupted by a phone call revealing that the weapon found at Ted's house was never used. Additionally, it's established that Ted did not leave his house after committing the crime until his arrest, eliminating the possibility of him swapping weapons. Willie decides to revisit the crime scene the next morning. Despite finding no gunpowder on Ted's body or hands, he discovers 4 missing bullets from the cartridge. Oddly, there are no fingerprints on these cartridges. Convinced that the weapon is still in the house, Willie instructs his friend to continue the search before returning to his office. Back at the office, Willie is handed a file containing evidentiary documents for the case. Upon opening it, he notices that each sheet bears the word "no" scribbled in red pen, raising further questions and adding an air of mystery to the unfolding legal proceedings. Upon seeking out Ted, Willie is astonished to discover that Ted seems to understand him thoroughly. Ted unveils that he has enlisted a secret agent to dig up a trove of personal information about Willie. Playfully teasing him, Ted proposes that Willie becomes his defense attorney, insinuating a chance to switch sides before things escalate, but Willie declines. Before parting ways, Ted shares a childhood story involving inspecting eggs for flaws, emphasizing that one can find weaknesses in anything with a keen eye. Willie is left pondering if Ted has discerned his vulnerability, to which Ted cryptically suggests he already has. As the trial unfolds, Willie takes turns questioning witnesses, while Ted sits quietly, engrossed in drawing blueprints, seemingly indifferent to the testimonies. Willie eventually calls Lieutenant Rob as a witness, who attests that Ted had confessed to killing his wife, adding a compelling layer to the unfolding courtroom drama. During the trial, Ted counters Lieutenant Rob's testimony by claiming that the lieutenant was having an affair with his wife, asserting he has proof. In a burst of aggression, the lieutenant reacts by physically attacking Ted, leading to the trial being abruptly postponed. Later that evening, Ted, Willie, and the judge convene. Ted presents evidence of a motel where the lieutenant and Jennifer spent time together, obtained through a private investigator. Ted argues that the lieutenant's presence during the confession might have influenced Ted to say what led to his wife's death just to appease him. Consequently, the judge halts the confession, granting Willie a few days to gather more evidence. Failure to do so means Ted could potentially go home. Following this development, Willie's employer expresses resentment for losing the case, criticizing him for being unprepared. Despite Willie's attempts to explain the situation, his boss remains adamant. Seeking solace, Willie turns to Nikki, discovering that she convinced his boss not to fire him. Grateful, they spend the night together. Upon returning home, Willie receives a package containing an eggshell, igniting his fury. The next morning, he confronts his boss in his office, likely aiming to address the fallout from the recent trial proceedings. Willie, undeterred by his employer's suggestion to resign, resolves to see the case through to the end, driven by his belief that someone like Ted deserves imprisonment. Despite the looming threat to his position, he heads to the police station and reproaches his friend for overlooking Ted's weapon. Persuaded, his friend agrees to conduct one final search of Ted's house. Next, Willie visits the despondent Lieutenant Rob, who has lost not only his case but also his family. He then goes to the motel where the affair unfolded, securing the day's CCTV footage. Back at the office, Ted adds insult to injury with a mocking phone call, but Willie presses on. Visiting Ted's house, Willie discovers that the police still haven't found the weapon. Undeterred, he keeps a watchful eye on the house and, in a glimmer of hope, visits the hospital, anticipating Jennifer's recovery. Unfortunately, a doctor delivers the grim news that even if she regains consciousness, she is unlikely to speak or remember the events, further complicating the case. Later, Willie is invited to Nikki's family home for a meal where the case becomes a topic of discussion. Nikki's brother mocks Willie, unaware that he has resumed work on the case. Nikki becomes infuriated upon learning of Willie's renewed efforts, leading to a heated argument. However, Nikki's father, a judge, encourages Willie to persevere in the pursuit of justice. That night, Lieutenant Rob seeks out Willie and offers to plant false evidence, a proposition Willie rejects. The following day, despite obtaining CCTV footage, the footage is inconclusive as Ted was wearing a hat. A disagreement ensues between Willie and the detective, as Willie maintains his belief that the gun is still in Ted's house, undiscovered by the police. Frustrated and running out of options, Willie decides to accept the lieutenant's offer to present false evidence in court. During the trial, he plans a strategic ruse, making a phone call and instructing his secretary to feign delivering new evidence by whispering in his ear. As the trial commences, Ted pushes for an acquittal, arguing that no reasonable jury could find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The courtroom drama intensifies with Willie's intricate plan in motion. In the courtroom, faced with the prospect of Ted seeking acquittal, the judge queries Willie about additional evidence. Initially poised to execute his planned ruse, Willie hesitates, realizing Ted's cunning nature. Opting not to go through with it, Willie claims to have no further evidence, resulting in Ted's release. Shortly after, a gunshot reverberates, drawing Willie outside where he discovers Lieutenant Rob has taken his own life. Ted is handed his gun, and he returns home, while Willie remains at the hospital, hoping for Jennifer's recovery. The next morning, Ted shows up at the hospital, triggering Willie's concern that he might harm Jennifer. Desperate, Willie turns to Nikki, pleading for assistance despite her reluctance to get involved. Unmoved, Nikki contends that he shouldn't be there, and she cannot help. Fearing for Jennifer's safety, Willie seeks guidance from his boss only to learn that Ted has obtained a restraining order against him due to frequent visits to the hospital. Ted is now a free citizen, and Willie is advised to cease his efforts. With limited options, Willie turns to Nikki's father, who signs an injunction, granting Willie permission to be at the hospital to protect Jennifer from potential harm. The legal complexities intertwine with personal turmoil as Willie endeavors to safeguard Jennifer's well-being. Tragically, Willie arrives at the hospital too late, finding that Ted has already taken the life of his wife. The weight of guilt settles on Willie, compounded by his sense of shame for allowing a murderer to go free. However, his employer contends that it was, in fact, an attempted murder. Haunted by the consequences of his actions, Willie embarks on a journey of redemption. Refusing to return to work, he immerses himself in legal papers and facts. Collaborating with his detective friend, they make a crucial discovery. During a meeting, Ted mistakenly calls Willie's phone, revealing a vital clue. Ted invites Willie to his home, ostensibly to offer a parting gift before leaving on a trip. Upon entering Ted's house, Willie unravels a web of deception. Ted had acquired a gun identical to the lieutenant's, exchanged them at the motel, and anticipated the lieutenant presenting his gun in court. Knowing this, Ted orchestrated a series of switchers to manipulate the evidence and sow confusion. Willie, fueled by determination, begins to untangle the intricate web of deceit that has clouded the truth. Ted, wearing a knowing smile, acknowledges the accuracy of Willie's revelations and criticizes the lieutenant for carrying the weapon that became a focal point during the trial. Ted nonchalantly claims he used a single gunshot to kill 2 rabbits, highlighting the manipulation of evidence. He confidently asserts that even if Willie had the evidence, prosecuting him for the same crime twice would be impossible. Willie, however, counters this by proposing a new angle. Since Ted allowed Jennifer to die, Willie suggests obtaining the bullet from her skull, comparing it with the one from the lieutenant's gun, and then charging Ted with first-degree murder, a fresh charge. The police arrive to arrest Ted, setting the stage for a new trial. As the new trial looms, Willie stands alone, while Ted is surrounded by a formidable team of high-priced defense lawyers. The legal battle intensifies, marking a pivotal moment in the pursuit of justice and the unraveling of Ted's elaborate schemes. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell if you want to watch more videos like this. Thank you for watching and see you again soon. Take care.